Okay, welcome to Dr. M's Experienced Functional and Sports Medicine podcast. We're really glad you're here today. And one of the things that we're just trying to do here, give you a lot of practical information in a short period of time. Most of these are solos, just with me, Dr. David Musnick, MD. And I'm board certified in sports and functional medicine. I've been doing functional medicine for 28 years. And I wanted to have a podcast that was practical, that got a lot of information both to the public and to medical practitioners. So this is number 4. This episode is on EMF, electromagnetic fields, and about how to do some practical things for yourself, your family, and or if you're a healthcare provider, what to recommend for your patients. So let's get started with this. So first of all, I want to define this. It's not just EMF. There's actually 3 types of exposure that we're talking about on this electromagnetic spectrum. Radio frequency, then there's electromagnetic fields, and then there's electrical fields. So let me explain the difference. And at some point we might have a graph of this, but at any rate, radio frequency exposure is different than electrical exposure, and it's different than electromagnetic fields. And radio frequency exposure is the most common exposure we're all getting right now. Where's it coming from? It's coming from your cell phone. It's coming from your wireless network at work or at home. It's coming from the 5G towers, but it's also coming from Bluetooth devices. So any Bluetooth device, including a remote control or the earphones that come out of your ears that don't have wires on them, they're all these types of radio frequency fields. Why are they dangerous? Because they've been found to disrupt the blood-brain barrier and actually can cause dysfunction in the central nervous system in the brain. Electromagnetic fields, let's talk about what the blood-brain barrier is. The blood-brain barrier is a network of blood vessels and cells all around the brain. Its job is to protect the brain and only let certain things in, and meaning oxygen and nutrients. And its job is to keep a lot of things out, like bacteria, viruses, toxins. It's like the police force of your brain. How is it supposed to work is it's supposed to be highly functioning. But what's very interesting is the blood-brain barrier has these barrier proteins in it that are very similar to the gut. And if someone has leaky gut, they could also have a leaky blood-brain barrier. There's many things that can damage the blood-brain barrier. One of them is electromagnetic fields. Now, I don't know if I mentioned this, but in podcast 3, when we were talking about insomnia, let's bring this up now. Did you know that insomnia, or having less than 7 hours of sleep, can be responsible for a leaky blood-brain barrier? If you get a leaky blood-brain barrier, what does that mean? That means toxins can get in, heavy metals can get in, parts of bacteria can get in, viruses can get in. In other words, all kinds of pollutants that you don't want in the brain that can cause brain fog, that can cause inflammation, that could cause headaches, that could cause migraines, or even lead to autoimmunity. And I've been seeing a lot of brain autoimmunity in my practice. And so, protecting the blood-brain barrier is very important. And I've determined that protecting and mitigating against radio frequency fields is very important. Now, just one thing to bring this up. How do you measure these fields? If you want to measure radio frequency fields, there's a couple devices. One, there's called a tri-field meter, TRI, field meter. It's reasonably good, but it's not as accurate as specific meters for specific types of these fields. So there's one called Safe and Sound 2, and we're going to have a link to that. But Safe and Sound 2 can provide you with a meter about this big, and It's excellent for measuring radio frequency fields. And really what you want to do is you want to stay away from anything higher than moderate. And even moderate isn't good to be in. But a lot of people are working and sleeping and living in literally extremely high fields all the time. And that's really not good because, like I said, it can cause headaches. It can disrupt the blood-brain barrier. It can disrupt neuronal health. Okay, so in terms of this type of exposure, what can you do? One thing I recommend is minimize your use of these Bluetooth devices, earphones coming out of the ears. If you can, use something wired or something called an air tube headset. An air tube headset actually has an air tube that provides the sound, and it's just wired, and it goes into, say, a phone or an iPad or some other device. So minimize Bluetooth. Also minimize Bluetooth devices. Like I've got a keyboard here, but notice it's got a cord here, which I know seems crazy that, I'm using a corded USB keyboard, but I'm also using a corded USB mouse. So what I'm saying is that the Bluetooth devices that you're using are going to expose your body to radio frequency fields. So use USB corded keyboards, external mouse, other things. Try to minimize anything wireless that you're using. Okay, then what about from the cell phone? Well, when you sleep, you don't want to have a cell phone right next to your head while you're sleeping. So what can you do? Well, you could turn that into airplane mode. That's kind of, so to speak, a no-brainer. But if you want to end up with a brain, what I'm saying is don't sleep with a cell phone that's on, receiving all night long. Put it into an airplane mode, or at least get it 10 feet away from your head. Okay? In regard to Wi-Fi networks are actually very damaging. There's 2.4 gig Wi-Fi networks. There's 5 gig Wi-Fi networks. They're both damaging, but really you want to minimize your exposure to it. So at home, the best thing to do is actually have Ethernet ports and actually plug into the Ethernet port for your internet access, for your computer, or for your TVs. That way you're fully wired. And then you can actually hook up a modem and do Wi-Fi when you need it, but turn it off most of the time. So at our house, we're fully wired actually, and don't have Wi-Fi on most of the time. I know that sounds crazy, but just if you want a healthy brain and healthy body, you're going to minimize exposure to radio frequency fields. So if you do have Wi-Fi at home, which most people do, turn it off at night. So here's a saying: friends don't let friends sleep with Wi-Fi. Of course, that doesn't mean the Wi-Fi is in your bed. You're not hugging it. But the Wi-Fi goes all through the house. It doesn't matter where it is. I often have my patients say, well, the Wi-Fi thing is like a few rooms away. It doesn't matter. If you are able to get Wi-Fi on your computer or your phone in your bedroom, then it's strong enough that you have to mitigate it. So I would say turn it off at the power switch, or do some computer program to get it to turn off and on. So you're not sleeping with it. Very important. Also make sure your kids don't have Bluetooth devices. Did you know that most phones, like iPhones, Androids, the Bluetooth part of this is on unless you turn it off. So I suggest on a phone, go into the settings and turn the Bluetooth off. Also, on iPads, go ahead and turn the Bluetooth off. And turn the Wi-Fi off if you're not absolutely needing it, because otherwise it's sending and receiving all the time and you're being exposed to it. So what you want ultimately is to be around an environment where you're not being exposed to a lot of radio frequency fields. And remember I said that's the most common ones you're being exposed to. Mitigation means decreasing them. There's different ways to do it. Now, at work, I actually wear a shielded lab coat that's actually shielding my heart, vital organs from the radio frequencies. I mean, you don't have to go that far. There are other things, like there's something called an AIRS Tech. An AIRS Tech or some other devices can actually create a scalar field around you that will somewhat neutralize the harmful biological effects of these fields, the radio frequency fields. And now let's talk about EMF. Electromagnetic fields is EMF, and it's anything that can generate an electromagnetic field, which are different than radio frequencies. This has to be measured with a different device. So there are devices, there's a number of companies that sell these things. Like I said, there's a tri-field meter, and the tri-field meter can be used for, it can be put on RF, it could be put on EMF, or it could be put on electrical. But it's not that accurate or as accurate as individual meters. So there is another individual meter that actually works on EMF and electrical. So in my house, we have the Safe and Sound 2, and then we have another device that is that checks for electrical and EMF. So where might you get EMF? Believe it or not, electric vehicles, hybrid vehicles. These are going to have a lot of it. Like when you put on the brakes in a hybrid vehicle, then there's going to be a lot of this coming through the actual floor. So believe it or not, the part of the car that's going to have the most fields, like EMF, is going to be near the battery, wherever that is going to be, but also at your feet. So a lot of people are starting to report, nerve tingling and issues with their feet. But I'm just going to tell you, if you're looking for a new car, bring these meters into the car and don't buy the car until you test drive it and decide that it's within acceptable levels for you and your family. Okay? That's kind of important. You want to check the fields where your kids are going to sit. You want to check the fields where you're going to be. You want to check the fields where your feet are. All super important, okay? Then there's something, okay, so what can produce electromagnetic fields? Well, a refrigerator, appliances can produce electromagnetic fields. So there's a lot of things that you wouldn't think could do it, but almost anything plugged into the wall can produce an electromagnetic field. A TV can produce an electromagnetic field. Believe it or not, an air filter could produce one if it's plugged into the wall. Lighting can do it. There's all kinds of things that can produce these fields. Printers can produce these fields. So very important to mitigate these things. Then what about electrical fields? Electrical fields have to do with wiring and whether the wiring was done correctly or whether it was done in a way that might increase electrical fields. So that's the kind of thing, if someone has the right kind of meter for that, for the electrical fields, which is often combined with the EMF meter, then sometimes you need to hire an electrician to correct those. It's not a bad idea. If any of you have anybody in the house that has migraines, Parkinson's, MS, brain fog, cognitive issues, hire somebody in your community to come out and measure these fields. Measure them in your house, measure them in the car, and maybe even measure them at work. And then try to figure out how to mitigate them. And like I said, there are some things, and we'll give you a link. We'll give you a link to some of these things that can be somewhat corrective. We'll give you a link in the links to companies that sell these meters. We're going to give you a link to AIRS Tech and devices that can be very helpful in regards to decreasing the effect on the human body. And actually there's even shielded clothing. So if you find yourself to be extremely sensitive, you might want to look on some of the websites for literally shielded clothing. There's shielded things with hoodies that you can put over your head. There's shielded blankets. When you look at that stuff, you actually have to look at what it's rated for, because not all of these, all the clothes and all the hats and everything else is actually shielding for all the, the various frequencies that you need. So check that out. It's very important. One other source that I wanted to tell you about of radio frequency that's incredibly important is these things called smart meters. What is a smart meter? It's an electrical meter on a house on the outside that looks like a dome, but it's got digital aspects to it. It is literally transmitting and receiving all the time to the power company how much power you're using and what you're using the power for. The problem is that they use incredibly high amounts of radio frequency. So I'll just give you a story. At one point in my home in Washington, I started having extreme headaches and extreme fatigue. I could barely get out of bed, and I thought, what is going on? I wonder if they put, a smart meter on without my approval, because I kept looking in the mail, and you're supposed to be able to opt out. If you opt out of a smart meter, you have to pay a little bit extra, and someone's literally going to come to your house and read the meter. But it's worth every cent for that service, because smart meters are incredibly high amounts of radio frequency fields. They will put your home into what's called an extreme level constantly of radio frequency fields. You can get a shield to put over it, but the problem is that it just puts the field more inside your house than going outside. So I do suggest for most people that you opt out of a smart meter. You pay the power company more money, if they'll let you, to come out and just get the readings occasionally. If you can't do that in your area, then at least put something called a smart card or a smart meter guard. And we'll have links to that at the end of the podcast, because at least you can shield it somewhat. Yes, some of it will go in the house, but it will bring it way down. So smart meters are a big issue in certain areas of the country. Not everywhere, but certain areas of the country. So takeaway messages: 3 types of fields: radio frequency, EMF, and electrical. The most problematic ones are radio frequency and secondarily EMF. You can be exposed anywhere. Believe it or not, the cars these days, with all their fancy things that they're monitoring, have a lot of Bluetooth in them. And the more things that you can do remotely, from, like remote activation of the car, turning it on, and things that you can do with your phone to turn it on, means there's more Bluetooth going on. So there's going to be exposure in cars. There's going to be exposure at work. There's going to be exposure virtually everywhere. Now that we have these satellites, there really is exposure almost everywhere. So if you are tending to get brain fog, if you're tending on getting more headaches, and this has been going on worse than the last, say, 5-6 years. Remember, 5G was introduced just soon, around COVID time. They both came in at the same time. A lot of people are having sort of headaches with it. And so if you're having some of these issues, then consider, either hiring someone to come into your home or getting the meters yourself, measuring these things and trying to get things down to even a moderate level. Now, each one of these meters will come with a little card that tells you what's more safe. There's a number of books about this subject. I actually wrote a foreword in a book called What the EMF? That was written by Risa Suzuki, who used to do a lot of home visits to determine this. But there's a lot of other books about this, and there's definitely some research on this. So take this to heart. Consider this as one of your things that you want to get healthier in. You want to mitigate or decrease your exposures to these fields. And, I'm hoping this will educate you more. Check the links that we have for these things that you can get, both to protect yourself and to do the measurements. And thanks for listening to our podcast number 4 on electromagnetic fields.